Hi, and welcome to episode 21 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. Today is Friday, the 1st of January 2016, so Happy New Year to all of you out there. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop. It looks like there's quite a few new subscribers in YouTube, so thank you very much for taking the time to check out my little podcast. We also have a Ravelry group where we have a 2016 Yarn Goals giveaway going on at the moment. So if you'd like to have a chance at winning a skein of yarn from Circus Tonic Handmade or some stitch markers, then come along and let us know what some of your 2016 yarn goals might be. So whether that's a particular thing or a project that you want to create, or whether there's a technique that you want to learn, I'd love to hear about it. I'm recording a little bit late. I normally record on Mondays, but I decided to extend my stay out in the central west of New South Wales, so I got back on Wednesday afternoon, and then it was New Year's Eve, and today's New Year's Day. I had a fairly quiet Christmas and New Year's, so I'm raring to go for 2016. I hope that you've had lovely celebrations, whatever you celebrate, and that 2016 is off to a good start. I don't have any spinning or dyeing to share this week, but I have a few works in progress, so let's get on with it. The first one is in one of my medium project bags that I sell in my Etsy shop, and it's my sock yarn blanket. So I took this out to my mum's, and she's working on a DK weight blanket, and I was incredibly surprised when, I knew that she knit fast, but I would get one square done on my blanket and she'd get 2 squares done on hers, and she's using the same stitch count as I am, so technically it's the same number of stitches, and she's just incredibly fast. So I've done 3 squares on my blanket while I was away. The first is this yellow and green gradient yarn that was sent to me by Celine from France, or Cecibel's Boucle, I think. Cecibel's B. And I can't remember what that yarn was, but if anyone needs to know, let me know and I'll dig up the tag for it. This next one is a sock yarn that was dyed by Hannah from the Rosehip Knits podcast, and she has a Rosehip Island Etsy shop, and she sent me that mini, and she also sent me this purple mini. So it's got a few different colours in there, and both of these yarns I can imagine would knit up into amazing socks. So thank you, Hannah, for sending those minis to me. I've still got a few more to go, and I'll be adding them in soon. There's been another person in the Ravelry group who has started a sock yarn blanket, which is fantastic, and I thought I would confess and show the backside of my blanket, because when I first started podcasting I mentioned that I was weaving in my ends regularly, but now that my mini collection has been growing, it's, I don't know, I guess I get very enthusiastic about adding new minis in that I haven't been doing my weaving. So this is the back that I started off with, and there's nicely woven in, and that's the rest of it. So lots and lots of ends that need to be woven in, but I'll get there. I think I need to allocate myself a couple of evenings where all I do is weave in ends to try to catch up, and then I'll try to get back into the habit of doing it, because it's not my favourite task by any means. so it would be nice to get it all neatened up. While I was chatting with my mum and we were knitting away on our blankets, she was giving me some tips about how to speed up my knitting by adjusting my grip, and she mentioned that the largest amount of knitting that she's ever done was to knit 7 DK weight jumpers or sweaters in 7 days. And she mentioned that it was when my father and my brother had gone for a holiday, and I'd stayed back with her, and I remember it. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I remember that we stayed home together, and she had managed to do seven sweaters, which is just mind-blowing. She was doing them for a designer, and I don't think I'll ever get up to that speed, but I can try. My next work in progress came along on my holiday with me as well, and it's what I'm calling my Craftfulness socks, because it is yarn from Sandra from the Craftfulness podcast and Craftfulness Etsy shop. So she sent me this yarn, and I knit this with a 60 stitch cast on with a twisted rib, and then 55 rows of leg, a reinforced heel and heel flap, and then, if I can get this to show, I decided to add some purl rows along the top of the foot. So every 4th row I knit a purl section for the top, just to give it some texture. I kind of wish I'd have started it from the top all the way down, but when it's seen in person it's actually more visible than what it is on camera. And then I've got a rounded toe, or I think it's called a star toe, where you do decreases at 8 evenly spaced places around the toe. So that's the first sock, and then I've got the second sock on the needles. I had knit the first sock with high sharps, which I love to use, but this yarn is fairly tightly spun. So this is the yarn. I don't know if you can tell, but it's got a fairly tight twist, and I was finding that with the higher sharps my stitches were leaping off the needles a bit quicker than what I wanted them to. So for the second sock I've switched over to the zings. So these zing needles were sent to me by Celine in a swap package recently, and I'm really enjoying using them. They're nice and light. One thing I've noticed is that it has the little text on there to show the size of the needle, and I can feel a little bit of drag on there, but I'm guessing that it will wear away a little bit with time, and it's not a big deal. The other thing I noticed with the zings was that I think I knit quite tightly on the ribbing, and so I was finding it a little bit difficult with the tips to pick up the stitches from the back loop for the twisted rib. So I think if I'd have been knitting a bit looser, then it wouldn't have been a problem, but they're a little bit blunter, well, they are blunter than the higher sharps, because they're incredibly sharp. So for stockinette stitch, these things are working really nicely, and I'm definitely going to be using these again on other socks, because I like the weight of them. I like that they're not splitting my yarn, and they're wonderful. So I'll probably get myself some other zings in different sizes as well when I have a need. So that's as far as I've got with the second sock. I may keep this again for some travel knitting, because I might need to go out west again soon. I don't normally travel this much. There's just a few things going on out west, so I'm waiting for another phone call about whether or not I need to go out there next week or the week after. but we'll see. So this yarn from Sandra, this is her card, Craftfulness, and it's a 75% BFL, 25% nylon superwash yarn, and I think that they look, the sock feels really nice on the foot, and I think it will wear really well. So that's that one, and I think that's all my knitting. I didn't take my cardigan with me because I figured it would be warm, and I knew that I wouldn't get that much knitting time because the Christmas break is a bit of relaxing and spending time with my mum. So while we got a chance to knit in the evenings, during the daytime we were busy doing other things, and it actually ended up being really cold out there. We had in the evenings it would get down to 12 degrees. I had woolly socks on and a fleece, and basically trying to rug up and stay warm. So it probably wouldn't have mattered to be trying on my cardigan in the evenings, but during the daytime we got into the 30s. So it's one of those funny parts of Australia where the temperatures seem to swing this way and that. I don't have any acquisitions. There's a few yarn shops in the area that I wanted to check out, but we were sort of doing everything else, and the shops I would have had to figure out whether they were open during the days that we were travelling around, but I'll get a chance to do that another time. So my 2016 yarn goals, there is a thread, as I mentioned, in the Ravelry group where you can pop in a goal or 10 if you want to, and I've sort of settled on my 2016 yarn goals, and I will add them to my Ravelry profile so that I can mark them off as I work on them. And I've set them at a fairly gentle level, I guess, and that means that I should be able to meet them, and I'll be really happy if I exceed them. So I'll read them off on the screen next to the camera, so I'll just stare off to the side for a little while. But I want to knit 6 pairs of socks, including a pair of 2 at a time socks. So I've tried to do that a couple of times and just given up and switched over to 1 at a time. So I definitely want to tackle that. I want to do a brioche project, an intarsia project, a lace project, and I want to knit a skirt and the Taskutakki cardigan that I showed off, was it probably 2 episodes ago. I want to take part in a mystery knit along. I have never done that before, and I've been watching some of the podcasters who have been working on the Doodler shawl, and as much as I like to be organised in a lot of my life, I sometimes do need to learn to let go, so it could be a fun thing to try out and see how I go. I want to learn to knit longer stretches without looking. So my mum's fantastic at just being able to stare out at the world while she's knitting, so I might need to get some more tips off her, and I know that there's some YouTube videos about that. If I'm doing stockinette, I can get about 6 stitches before I need to look. Sometimes I can do longer. Most of the time it's a bit shorter. I just get this fear that I'm going to drop all my stitches, and I know that I won't, but I just need to keep on trying and make a deliberate effort to do knitting without looking. I also want to learn English knitting, which I mentioned when I first started this podcast. I will stick with continental, there's no doubt about that, but I want to be able to understand English knitting so that I can do colour work easier when I'm holding 2 yarns, so that I could hold the yarn in 2 hands, and also that as I play around with different patterns and hopefully come up with my own pattern to publish on Ravelry at some point, I can also test it with English knitting just to make sure that my instructions sort of carry through with English knitting, because it's one of my fears is that perhaps there's something that I do in continental that people who knit English style would have a lot of difficulty with. So that's another goal. I want to buy from 3 Aussie indie dyers and 1 overseas indie dyer, and I'm sure I'm going to blow those numbers to smithereens and buy from many more, but I definitely want to support local as much as possible. But I'm also keen to try some of the international dyers out there, because I think so far I've only ordered from some New Zealand fibre dyers, but I haven't actually ordered any indie dyed yarn from overseas. I want to visit 3 new to me yarn shops. I want to do a fractal spin, so I was talking about that, I think it was the start of December. I've got the fibre ready to go, and I'll try to give that a go in the next week. I want to learn to spin a thicker woolen yarn, and I want to try a new yarn dyeing technique, so I'm not too sure what yet, but I'm sure I'll come up with something over the next year. And that's it. I think my goals feel a bit tame. There might be other ideas that pop up along the way, but I know that I will also fall in love with a bunch of patterns as the year goes on, so I don't want to fill up my entire 2016 at the start of it and not give myself any flexibility. So if that's got you thinking about your own yarn goals, then come along to the Ravelry group and join up, and you can enter the prize giveaway. I have said that it's closing on the 10th of January, but as I mentioned before, I might need to pop out of town, so if I don't manage to close it on the 10th of January, just feel free to enter until I close it, and I'll do the drawing whenever I get to do my podcast around the 10th of January. As for the holidays, there's not a huge amount to tell. It was fairly relaxing. We did a lot of driving around the central west of New South Wales, which is absolutely gorgeous countryside, lots of rolling hills and cows and alpacas and sheep, and went to towns like Bathurst and Cowra and Carcoar, Blaney, Woodstock, Orange, areas that I'd love to go and check out in winter time, because they get snow there, usually maybe one day a year, but they get snow, and it's been a very long time since I've seen snow in Australia. I went to the Snowy Mountains when I was about 10 years old, and I think I'm just getting cravings for Finland at the moment, so I've just had snow on the mind. So hopefully this year at some point I'll get to go and check that out. I also went to visit the Carcoar Wind Farm and Dam, so I took a little bit of footage there. There was a whole heap of people setting up their caravans and camping there. It's a free campground right next to the dam, so they bring their boats, go water skiing and fishing, and as we're driving around we also spotted some kangaroos on a hill. It was just at sunset when they tend to hop around, and they were just sitting on the hill. The video footage isn't that great because I was filming from a fair distance, having to zoom, and yeah, but I'll put it in here anyway so you can see a few little kangaroos. Well, actually they were quite big. One of them seemed to have a joey with it, and yeah, so it's a short episode. As I said, I normally film on Mondays, but because it's Friday today, I might leave the next episode until the 10th of January. If it looks like I have to go away, I might record a little bit earlier, and then one when I get back. So the filming schedule will be a little bit out of whack for the next few weeks, but as soon as possible I'll get back to Mondays. So I hope you're doing well. I've got a lot of podcasts to catch up on that I haven't had a chance to watch while I've been travelling around, so I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, take it easy, get a lot of knitting and crafting done, and I'll see you soon.